Today, please welcome Kaleen Marshall, the author of Who Will Love Me and CEO of the Viaggio Group located in Greater Chicago. Viaggio Group is a professional coaching and leadership consulting company, which is focused on helping people move forward along their journey to reach their full potential. In addition to coaching, Kaleen's also building a nonprofit organization called BellaViaggio, which is focused on leading and supporting adults with special needs, as well as their parents and caregivers through critical life transitions. She's also a published author. She wrote Who Will Love Me, written for caregivers, guardians, and advocates who care for children, teens, and adults with special needs. Kaleen shares her own personal journey with her sister, Carrie, who has Down syndrome.
Hi, Jared. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Could you take a few minutes and tell everybody about your business and basically you're speaking, authoring, and also you've got BellaViaggio. Could you tell the people a little bit about that?
Yeah. So in 2012-13, I was able to start my own business, and there's a backstory to that we'll get into, I know, later. But
Sure.
I started my own coaching business, Viaggio Group, which means journey. So I help people along their journey in life that get stuck or they need some direction. I went and I'm a certified coach, leadership coach, life coach, executive coach. And started that in 2013 as a small business owner and have done very well in it. I'm very grateful for that. And then I also, at the same time, started a nonprofit called BellaViaggio, which means beautiful journey. And some people ask me about the name. I got the name because I used to be a women's ministry director at a large church in the area. And we did a women's event called BellaViaggio. And I loved the name of it and it's always stuck with me. And I like that it talks about a beautiful journey. And really what it's about is helping families with special needs, kids, children, teens, or adults that have disabilities. And it just helps them move forward on the journey. But it's based around my story of both of my parents passing away and then inheriting my sister, Carrie, who has Down syndrome. And I have been her guardian for the last 9 years now. So the nonprofit was based on my book, Who Will Love Me? And just started it to help families move forward on their journey, knowing that most families don't have a place to go to just talk. And the big, hairy, audacious goal in BellaViaggio is to create communities for adults with special needs around the country. So the goal is to create a community here, a large community here in Illinois, knowing that there's 11 million Americans that have a loved one that has special needs in their home and that don't have a plan, don't know where they're going to go. The parents, the caregivers stay up all night wondering what's going to happen to my child when I die. So that's the goal of the nonprofit.
I love that big, hairy, audacious goal.
BHAG.
Exactly. It's impactful. I mean, you're helping so many people, and these are topics that people aren't talking about. These are topics that people really aren't covering. And people understand that yes, there's special needs people out there, but people with disabilities, but they basically don't think about as they progress through life, beyond being children, how that impacts the families.
Yeah. So because of my background, I have a special education background.
Okay.
And then I was able to formulate a special needs ministry in a church in the Chicagoland area. So I've just met a lot of people along the way, knowing with my sister Carrie with Down syndrome, and every day, it's kind of like you don't pay attention to a car until it's introduced to you.
Yes.
Well, it's the same thing with children, teens, and adults with special needs. When you have it on your radar or you see it all day long. Yes. And then it becomes more approachable. You learn how to have conversations. And every day I meet parents that I ask the question, is this your son or your daughter? No, they could be, or they'll say, I'm the caretaker for whomever. I met actually yesterday at a Starbucks, a woman walked in and she is taking care of her sister now. So I had a wonderful conversation with her. So it's really every day, all day long. If you're aware, it's kind of like the car, when you have a Mini Cooper, you notice all the Mini Coopers around you. So
that is a great point. I love that.
yeah.
And, the other piece of that you're talking about, which is being active and involved with people like that, raises the awareness, and then you become more in tune to all that around you, like you said.
Yeah. And then you become more sensitive to it and you become more educated, and then there's more clarity around it. And what happens is then you just want to step in and start helping.
Right.
So there's a huge need around our country with this population. And I have found too, the caretakers don't have a lot of places to go to process and to share because they're involved day to day, and most of them are exhausted day to day living, taking care of. The paperwork is incredible. That's the first thing I learned after my mom died. I'm like, the paperwork is incredible. Knowing what to keep, what not to keep. My mom had things in files, books, and going through all that and trying to understand it. And then I just learned to put a great team around me to help me so I didn't get inundated and stressed.
So you had the background experience, and then you decided to form the 501c3. Now that's not a small undertaking. Can you share a little bit about forming the 501c3? Like, what were your biggest obstacles, and was there anybody that helped you guide you through that process?
Yeah, so I just put myself around really smart people and a really good attorney in the area. So if anybody wants to know of a really great nonprofit attorney, I have one.
Awesome.
I know several, but I used one. Now, this is the interesting thing. When I went in to meet with him, you have to have a small board to begin with.
Sure.
And so you have your president, vice president, secretary, treasurer. I went in to speak with him. We all met with him. And he said, you need to know approval on this is going to take about 1.5 years.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh man, because I wanted to put my book underneath it. And you have to understand, I didn't know. I just did what smart people told me to do. And that's how I learned.
Sure.
Put aside all the pride, everything, and said, I don't know what I don't know. And walked into his office. He said, it's going to take about 1.5 years to get approval.
And what drove that 1.5 years? Is it just strictly paperwork, bureaucracy through the state?
Yeah, it's the government approving everything. So, but it was important that I knew what I was doing and what I was about, because the government wants to give approval to people who really are serious about this and want to move forward.
Sure.
So, and I had to know how to articulate what I was about.
Right.
So putting that down in paper. So he wrote it up, and it was just over 60 days that we got the letter back that we were approved.
Wow.
I was shocked. I got the letter and I opened it and I'm like, no, this must be wrong. And I called him and he goes, I got it too. He goes, congratulations.
So asked about all the stars lining up with things that we were putting this together. And this is kind of one of those items, right?
Yeah, it's an affirmation for me. I'm a woman of faith. I am a Christian. And so for me, it was a big deal that God was in this for me. Yeah, so that was very, very important. So we moved forward, and then I started writing my book. And if anybody wants to talk to me about that, I'm more than happy to help. I'm not the expert, but I have great people in my life that have helped me with that. I did self-publish after I went to an author's seminar for 4 days, and there were self-publishers there. And I thought, well, I'll call people that I know that have, an agent.
Right.
But it was really, really important to me, Jared, that the people who came around my book loved my book and loved my story, and bigger than anything, loved my sister.
Absolutely.
And our story. I didn't want somebody just to take it. Some people wanted to change my title right away, but my title was very, very important because it's really the last words that my mom said to my sister, who's going to love you like I did.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't want to change my title.
Yeah.
So
I totally understand that.
Yeah, there were non-negotiables for me. So yeah. So wrote the book.
Self-publishing doesn't mean you didn't have help. It just means that you released it on your own. I mean,
Yeah.
so there were other people involved in that process, right?
Yes, I actually hired a company in Texas to publish it for me and edit it. I had a team of 5 women here that came around me. A couple of them were my clients, so they knew how I spoke and how I thought. So they helped me put phraseology around how my brain, when you're in the midst of your own story, sometimes it's hard to clear the weeds. Sure. And so these ladies helped me clear the weeds. So
excellent.
It was a great process. It took about, 3 years to publish it because I kept putting it back up on the shelf saying, I don't want to do this. And it was actually my kids after an event that happened in our home that said, you need to publish your book, Mom. You need to get it off the shelf. Whatever it takes, you need to do that.
I'm glad you shared it because we'll get into your backstory in a minute. And it's a powerful one. That's why I wanted to have you on the podcast, is one, to increase awareness around what you're doing and help extend your reach, but secondly, to help tell that story. So before we get into that though, I know nonprofits are just really conscientious of all the accounting and paperwork. And like you said, there is a lot of bureaucracy and red tape you go through. Yeah. Do you guys manage that all yourself? Do you have like somebody you go through who specializes in all the accounting and all the background in that?
Yeah. So my secretary treasurer of my nonprofit takes care of that. And then my attorney. So they're the ones that do all the filing and all that. So yeah.
God bless them. I hear it's a lot. So
yeah.
Very good.
Grateful for people around me.
Well, now that people have a good baseline of what your businesses are and, some of the activities you're involved in, like being an author, being a trainer, being a speaker, could you tell a little bit about your backstory without giving away the whole thing, right? As far as how this came to be in your life story.
Yeah. So my parents, of course I was raised in a family that my youngest sister has Down syndrome. She was born in 1967 when they didn't know a lot. They actually, the doctors wanted to institutionalize her, like put her in an institution, like what we would know as a place that she would be locked up. And my mom and dad chose not to do that. So, you have this journey of life. I can remember the social worker coming to our house telling us every time she showed up what Carrie couldn't do. She'll never be able to walk or talk or nothing. So my brother and I put Carrie in a box to teach her how to sit up. And the box was just perfect for her size. And Carrie sat with her legs straight out, and we just took a razor blade and cut down the sides. And when the social worker showed up, that's how we said, well, she's sitting up now, so tell us something else she can't do.
Right.
So, but we didn't have therapy. I mean, today you have wonderful organizations, Gigi's Playhouse, an amazing organization where now when somebody's born with Downs, they say, congratulations.
Right.
And there's thousands of people on Facebook and all of our organizations that I'm a part of, just to encourage families, because I remember what it was like. And there's so much more now to help. So you're not alone. But my mom and dad were really alone in it. But my parents were very tenacious. And Carrie grew up in our home, and my mom and dad treated her like us and did a very, very nice job with her. So, so fast forward 2005, my dad gets a rare blood disorder. Now you have to understand, everybody in my household died in their 90s, like all my aunts, uncles, grandparents. My dad's 67 years old, and he gets this blood disease that they say about 3,000 people in the world have it, don't know a lot about it. And he ended up passing away from an infection. So then from there, we sat down with my mom, and my mom had her own plan of how she wanted to do this with Carrie, because we knew we had to make a plan.
Sure.
And my mom's plan was for our family to move to Arizona, and our plan was to bring Carrie here or develop a home, or could we find a community for her?
Sure.
So that led into an estranged relationship with my mom for several years. And then in 2011, she called and said that she had stage 1 breast cancer.
Wow.
And would we come to visit her? So a lot of this is in the book, and you can read about it. But we flew to Arizona only to find out my mom was in the last 30 days of her life. She had stage 4 breast cancer.
Yeah,
it was a big shock for us. She had hidden it. And again, that story's in the book. But what I've learned is a lot of parents hide their health, and they don't take care of themselves because they put everything into the child. Yes. So that's something I encourage not to do, so that you can live a long life and help take care of the child and help with the transition.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
That piece of, just understanding where your parents are at, what arrangements have been made. A lot of people are really afraid to have that conversation. I get it. I think your case really is kind of special too, because after your dad passed from that blood disorder, like you said, you were estranged. And literally, you and your mother weren't on talking terms, right?
No, my mom actually was angry at us because we wouldn't move to Arizona.
Yeah. Okay.
And do what she asked us to do. So we did not talk for several years. And when we got the phone call, we were surprised.
Sure.
So we flew there, and now we're more in an emergency type of situation. And walked into the house, and my sister, who is around 100 pounds, 95 to 100 pounds, I immediately took her because I hadn't seen her for several years, and took her into the bathroom and put her on the scale. And she was at 67 pounds.
Wow.
So I was like, you just know the trauma, like something's wrong. And so greeted my mom, and her arm was fully inflamed. And she told me she had a mosquito bite. Ended up taking her to the doctor the next day, and met the doctor, and the doctor just allowed me to look at her chart because we were in an emergency situation.
Right.
And so I confronted my mom, and the truth started coming out. And we had just a few days. I actually came back to my parents' home. My husband was working on things around the house that needed help. And we ended up flying back to Illinois. I turned around. I took a leave of absence, turned around on February 1st of 2012. February 8th, I took full guardianship of my sister. And on February 10th, my mom passed away early in the morning.
That's such an aggressive timeline of just very, I'm not sure traumatic's the right word, but it's such a lot of life-changing things that are happening all at once, right? And I know you've said before when we've talked in conversation that your husband was a great support and resource for you. Was there anybody else who kind of rallied around you during that time?
Gosh, I'm thinking back. Yes. I mean, we had friends, but people didn't know how to handle it all, nor did I know how to handle it. We were involved in a wonderful church, but it's when things are moving so fast and you have to make decisions. It's hard for people to adapt to it. I mean, there are people still to this day that walk through the journey with us and, love us deeply. And you feel very isolated too, because nobody can really understand, why. A lot of questions like, why weren't things in place? Why didn't you know? Why didn't you move there? You should have just given up your life here in Illinois, and this wouldn't have happened.
That's a big ask.
Yes. And I talk about that in my book. And when I sit down with support groups and parents, I talk about that ask. And most parents, Jared, have it in their head and on paper, they have it all written down in a notebook somewhere, how they want this, but they have not shared it with the person. We just met with somebody a few weeks ago. He's like, my mom has organizers around the house. And she goes, it's all organized. And I said, has she ever told you? No. Have you ever asked her? No. Because of the tension of feeling like, what are you going to find out? You might, and so I encourage parents to know about the finances and to share, to talk about guardianship. Guardianship is huge. And if anybody wants to talk to me about that, I have some great guardian lawyers that I can connect them to. I have a great financial advisor that I would connect them to. So I get calls pretty much every week about hearing somebody's story and then helping them take the next steps. So
that's so important. I just want to pause here because some people just don't want to have that conversation. They're just literally afraid to have the conversation because they think if they think it will, something bad's going to happen, right? But it's really about being prepared and taking care of those people that you're going to leave behind. I know, I've got a 14-year-old daughter, and my wife and I, we talked, about putting the will together, and this is something we should have done years ago, but we delayed the conversation because I know my wife just was afraid to have that conversation. And our, family is, a different scenario where, there's people in place that could take care of things and stuff, but it just becomes that much more important when you have a special needs child who can't take care of themselves.
Yeah. So if anybody, whoever's watching this, if they could just take away one thing, it would be what I'm about to say. And it's going to sound very, it's going to sound very insensitive, but it's the best thing that actually, after my parents died, I had a therapist tell me this. The bottom line is, the mom and dad are not going to be alive. The caretaker's not going to be, they will be dead. You will be dead. If you're a caretaker and watching this, you will be dead.
Right.
You will be dead. And your best thing you can do right now is to set up the whole, whether it's communication, all of the paperwork, guardianship, lawyers, look at your finances right now. And allow people to know about it, because the person who gets hurt in the end is the person with special needs.
Right. I mean, it is a must-have. You have to have that conversation. You have to employ and pull in the right people to make sure that everything's documented well, and that people recognize where to get this information. That was a big thing you pointed out, is like you go in, it's like a disaster.
Yeah.
Is it in one place? Do people know how to access it? Because like you said, you're protecting your child with special needs and ensuring that their life after yours is going to be, full one.
Right. And we forget that, like my mom, her last words were, who's going to love you? Who's going to take care of you? Even though I was in place, I start my book out with the story of a lady who actually had a heart attack in our home. And we had a party here, a party for special needs adults. And they revived her and they were taking her out of our house. And she goes, who's going to take care of my son, basically, is what she was yelling.
Yeah.
And that's why I got the book off the shelf, because it's the reality of, there are all these people that have disabilities.
Right.
That if we really care about them and love them, the best thing we can do is plan and to allow people to come alongside of you. And I think that there's just shame in it. I think there's guilt. And then there's no energy because you've done this. And if you're waiting, I talk to families, Jared, the parents in their 70s and 80s.
Right.
And, my hope is that I can just, move towards them, allow them to trust me. But, and this is why I want to build a home, because a lot of them say, well, where are they going to live? And I'm like, I want to build a home. So
that, I just think there's so many things going through my head right now. I mean, if you have 11 million people with special needs and disabilities that need to be taken care of, there's that many parents, and how many rough estimate do you think are adequately prepared? Is it like even 10%? I mean, I think it's probably a very, very large percentage, right?
Yeah. So what happens is, Okay, so I know programs that are in college, like for there's universities around the country that have developed programs for the adult with special needs to come in, learn, go to school, and then come out with a job. You know, we'll help you. 99% of those adults that leave college move back home.
Wow.
They don't move into their apartment or into a community because the housing shortage is so, and parents, they're okay with letting go as long as it's their plan.
Right.
So the biggest thing I learned with my sister, I learned so much, and I'm still learning. But my sister she's actually in a home in the area, and she loves it.
Sure.
She couldn't wait to move out. When I suggested that she move out into her own apartment, she said to me, I said, what are you doing? I just had suggested it. She walked upstairs. I hear this banging. And she goes, I go, what are you doing? She goes, me move out. And I go, Carrie, why do you want to move out? And she goes, you stop bossing me around. And I was like, okay, she's ready. Right. And I was ready because I was tired of like being the sergeant or the drill sergeant or trying to make it all happen. And she was ready. Now she is in botany. She never touched dirt in her life until now. When I saw her in botany class, somebody sent me a picture. I'm like, you are kidding me.
Right.
She's in botany. She's swimming twice a week. She's bowling. She's in yoga.
Yeah.
She's in bell choir. Now, when she moved in there, she told them, nope, me not do any of this. Yeah. I'm not doing any of it. But she's in an environment where people are fresh and they can speak into her. And all of her friends were going to botany. She didn't be left out.
It's a very nurturing environment that encourages them to do those things. I know you told me about this, and I love that story about how, like, you know, she was just, hey, I'm ready to move out. I'm ready to go, right?
Yeah,
I'm gonna have my own place. So that freedom is really important, and this was just down the road from you, right? I mean, you learned about this like just by a chance meeting, and it's just down the road from you.
Yeah, at Special Olympics, I just walked, and we were late because we're always late, and I don't like being late. And there was a chair by a woman, and when I sat down, I was very hurried, and she got her in her lane, and she doesn't care. She's putting on her shoes. They're already, and then the beautiful thing is they all stopped and waited for her because they're all just so beautiful. They're not, you know, critical, judgmental.
Right.
But the lady, she goes, is that your daughter? And I said, no, that's my sister. And she goes, where does she live? Like, it was just like, and I said, oh, she lives with me. And she goes, have you ever thought about placing her in a community? And I go, today, yes, I would love to.
Right. Yeah.
But I said, you know, and I started telling her a story, and I said, it's got to be safe. It's got to be sustainable.
Right.
And I need to know that she's cared for and she's having fun. And now I was faced with how my mom and dad felt.
Right.
And I was wrestling. It was hard. And the part of the story that I didn't, I don't even know if it's in the book, but I did go on a tour that week. I actually called them. I said, what the heck? What's it going to? So I went on a tour, and it wasn't, if any parent is listening to me right now, it wasn't exactly what I would have wanted. But was it safe, sustainable, beautiful? It was all remodeled. It was beautiful. But in my head, I had it a way that I wanted it.
Right.
But I'm like, my husband said, hey, we need to give this opportunity. We need to walk into it and tell. And there were so many positives, like, you know, so many positives. And after my tour, I started driving home, and I could feel the release of the pressure that I had felt for so many years, like even growing up, of taking care of her. And the place is about 20 minutes from us. I actually stopped in a parking lot halfway home, in a Starbucks parking lot, and I slept for 2 hours.
Really?
I couldn't make it home.
Just that, that just drained from
Exhausting.
everything and just overwhelmed, right?
And and then I got home and Wally's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I go, and that's when I turned to Carrie and I said, "How
Mhm.
would you like to move into your own apartment?"
Right.
And she went upstairs and started packing.
Yeah.
And that's when she told me, "You stop bossing me around." And it was just like aligned.
Yeah.
And I want parents to realize that their kid really wants to explore the world.
I love that story for that reason. Because I think, we put a lot of labels and we underestimate what they're capable of.
I
Right? Like
know.
they have these wants and needs. They want to live like the rest of us, right? They want their own place. They want to do these things. And in a structured environment like that, it's capable. And I think what it really speaks to as well, knowing your sister was born during a time where early on these places didn't exist. They
Mhm.
weren't the way they are. Like you said, going to an institution, you did everything in your power as a family to keep her out of that, right? And now with the understanding and awareness of the needs and everything, these places are a lot more accommodating to that. They may
Yeah.
not be perfect, but they're a lot more accommodating to that.
Yeah, and we often focus in on the negative, and I'm just choosing to focus in on the positive of
Mhm.
what was coming before us.
Sure.
And everything was just kind of and I believe it was happening for us to tell our story and
Right.
to be very vocal about it,
Hmm.
so that and not afraid. Yeah, was it hard, Jared? I would be lying if I didn't tell you how hard it's been. You
Yeah.
know, it didn't. It's not like it just happened.
No.
But there were so many things that I entered into. My husband, my kids. My kids have been interviewed, and they were interviewed for the gal who was helping me put everything together for my book.
Okay.
And my fear was like, oh, because they were coming back home from college and
Hmm.
now we're all in our home
Yeah.
together. And it was hard because Carrie, like one little small thing, Carrie never had a razor in the bathtub for safety reasons. Well,
Sure.
my kids, my boys, she's sharing a bathroom with them. They have razors in the bathroom, right? So
Wow.
she would take
Okay.
them and throw them away every morning. Now, do you think my kids got mad? Yeah,
Yeah, they
they're
might
trying
have.
to
Yeah.
they're trying to go to work. So lots of adaptability, I mean, that's just one.
Yeah. That's just that's a little piece. Because
Yeah,
people, they talk about if you're a parent of an autistic or special needs Down's child, there are many times you feel like the children aren't growing up and you feel like you're dealing with children having tantrums all the time.
yeah,
And it's very draining, your energy levels. And I don't have to tell you, you've lived this, you've seen it.
yeah,
So, I mean, I give parents a lot of credit. And if they
yeah.
are drained, there's avenues like you're bringing out to speak to, that will help. One thing I do want to talk about a little bit though, and this was alarming when you told me this statistic. Can you recite the statistics again about where Illinois ranks and why you were hesitant to look at a lot of these things?
So what I didn't know, Carrie lived in Arizona.
Mhm.
They're top 5 in the country. I did not know that. So my mom and dad, my mom had home-based services,
Mm.
which my mom took care of Carrie, but they put her on a structured schedule
Sure.
of working. She volunteered twice a week. So there's a structure all day
Mhm.
long that I actually managed for a year. And then my mom got paid to do that. It's called home-based services. It might be
Yep.
different wherever we're at, but home-based services. Then my mom had respite care. Um, what I didn't know, when you move to Arizona or from Arizona to outside of any other state, you lose those services. Those are only
Okay.
state to state.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
I'm thinking everything's just transferring over. I'm going to come in, qualify, and I didn't qualify for anything.
Really?
Our state is at the time was 49th um, in the country in taking care of the disabled, meaning 49, the worst,
Yeah,
not
we're
like the
second to
best.
last. Right.
And Arizona was in the top 5. So when I went to my advocacy group,
Mhm.
and she said, well, there's nothing for you, and we were basically told you have a car and it moves forward and you're doing good. And I was like, you have got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
Because I quit my job, and I mean, there's just so many pieces of the story.
Sure.
So there's 30,000 families in the state of Illinois that are in a situation like mine.
Mhm.
Um,
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I definitely applaud the work you're doing. I love it. I have a side business, Parchment, that we are trying to grow through giving. So we're trying to donate and give to special needs communities like yours. And that's why I appreciate your message so much more. And it takes courage to share a story like that and to see what you've done with it, where you've turned it into something that helps others and helping these families deal with it, is very admirable. Um, when I look at this, for people listening here, is there any way they can help or assist you in your business, in your reach, extending your reach, or how would they participate and help you?
Well, I want to offer help to parents, of course, by coaching. I coach several families with adults with special needs, or
Mhm.
teens and adults with special needs. I'd love to get into more of the young moms,
Mhm.
and start support groups to start processing, and dads. I have done some work with some groups where one group, for example, it was husbands and wives,
Mhm.
moms and dads. And I actually flew to California for this group. And I noticed all the men were kind of sitting like this, and the women were doing all the talking. So I just asked for a moment that the women, stop talking and sharing. And I'd love to hear from the men. And it took a few minutes. There was quiet in the room. And then one dad, he looked at me and he goes, nobody's ever asked me how I'm doing, ever.
Wow, that's powerful.
And he got very emotional, started
Yeah.
crying. And then other dads, and there was a grandpa in the room, started crying. And they said, we're never asked. We go to work, we come home, but I've never heard a word from my son. They had an autistic child. He goes, I've never heard I love you. I've never
Mhm.
heard. And he just went on. And to have that process group for
Mhm.
them to process in, um, I just think it just helps get it out.
Mhm.
And
Do you have a group like that you
yeah,
started that
so
they
I
could
lead
enroll in?
groups like that, and then
Okay.
I am aligned with some therapists to help me. I am not a therapist, but
Mhm.
I am aligned with a couple therapists that help.
At the end of the podcast, I'm going to include, ways that people can reach out and contact you through LinkedIn and through email, as well as, your websites where they can go. If you have any specific sites where people should go for this type of thing, for like men who want to join a men's group and like that, I would love to have include those at the end of the podcast.
Okay.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to say to the people listening, as far as, starting a 501c3, having autistic relatives, and making sure they're cared and properly taken care of after the parents move on? Is there anything you want to share? Any poignant things that came up that you didn't cover during the course of the podcast?
No, I just feel honored. I sit here every time I do a different podcast, the topic always moves, right?
Sure.
And I am grateful for my story, um, that I get to turn around and help share it,
Yeah.
and to help the caretaker.
Hmm.
It's interesting because I grew up in a family. My mom and dad did a really good job of caring for Carrie.
Hmm.
And then here I am, caring for her now. And she was never
Right.
supposed to live, Jared. She has 3 holes in her heart.
Yeah.
And so that's the other thing. She outlived both my mom and dad.
Incredible.
So, when I stand up at seminars, the other thing would be I'd love to speak to parent support groups or
Yeah.
seminars, any seminar. But when I stand up and speak, I always ask the question, what keeps you up at night?
Yeah.
What keeps you up at night? And inevitably, somebody will stand up with lots of emotion and
Mhm.
say, it's my kid, and what's going to happen to him when I die.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
that's what I want to help with. Help
Your
help move them
story,
forward on
your
that.
story is an incredible one there, Kaleen, and that, you are uniquely positioned to help people because, you've lived this, You deal with a lot of people in the space. You're very good, like you said, you have these coaching skills and things that you've gained in the past, and it all came together to serve you in this way. And I know you're a lady of faith, and you believe that through a higher power, that's all come to be. And I totally agree with you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm going to put at the end of this podcast for our listeners links to contact Kaleen, for her websites, to get her book, to see her story, and if you want to contact and reach out to her because you need assistance as well. So thank you so much, Kaleen. You have a great rest of your day, and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you'd like to reach out to Kaleen, LinkedIn address is below, as well as her email. Or you can go to her website at kaleenmarshall.com, contact, and you can reach out through there. Today, please welcome. Additional links that were discussed during the podcast are below, such as www.kaleenmarshall.com, kaleenmarshall.com for the Who Will Love Me book, Viaggio Group, the Viaggio Group Foundation BellaViaggio, and Gigi's Play. If you want to recommend somebody to appear on the podcast as a guest, please email us at info@opsqc.com. If you're interested in sponsoring a podcast, please reach out to us at the same email. We'd love to have your support.